Woo.
Welcome to Night Talks, the University of Florida College of Journalism and Communications talk show, produced by students for students. I'm Paola Perez, a freshman studying media production. Our guest today is Jamal Sowell, who is a 2005 UF graduate. After college, he enlisted as a Marine and went to war to Afghanistan, before taking on roles including Special Assistant to UF President Bernie Machen, working in Israel for Sharat Hadin, Chief of Staff for Port Tampa Bay, and the Florida Secretary of Commerce. He's a Pat Tillman Scholar and board member of the UF Alumni Association and nationally acclaimed veterans organization team, Red, White, and Blue. He's a member of the Florida Council of 100 and is the president of Business Solutions at Indelible, a national management consulting firm, while serving the United States Navy Reserve. Hi, Jamal. Thank you so much for being here today.
No problem.
Going back to your time in college, what drew you to study religion at UF?
I went to a small Christian school. My senior class had about 15 students, maybe 4 or 5 of those were homeschool students. So I always enjoyed the topic of faith. My mom raised my brothers and I to be pastors, so both of them are now involved in Christian ministry. So as I got to UF, my plan was to go to UF and then graduate and then go to seminary school, but something was different in store for me. And I think that that major allowed me to understand different faiths and different backgrounds. So as a student, I came here, I said, well, I want to learn about other religions, other faith beliefs. So I joined the Jewish Student Union and met people at the Hillel and just started to ask questions. And for me, it was more so trying to really broaden my horizon that opened so many doors. So I majored with the hopes of being a pastor, but I took a different direction as I got more involved in college and obviously became student body president.
So while finishing your bachelor's degree, you were also the student body president, as you just said, and university trustee. You graduated from a small Christian school in Central Florida where your senior class was 15 people, with a lot of those being homeschool students. So from the outside looking in, that seems impossible for one to come from such a small school to say they now want to lead a student body of over 50,000 students. So tell us a little bit about that experience, and was it tough balancing, your academic demands and the trials of being student body president?
I came to UF in the summer of 2000. Very overwhelmed at first, because obviously coming from Orlando, I'm from an area called Pine Hills, and I got to UF, I said, well, what do you do? There's so many people here, 50,000 students. And for me, I just had a genuine interest in getting to know people. I joined the Hispanic Student Association, Asian Student Union, other groups. My perspective was like, all of my friends should not have my beliefs. All of my friends should not look like me. I need to have a vast array of friends from different backgrounds. So that taught me about places like Miami, people like in Atlanta and the West Coast and the Midwest, people from around the world were here at UF. Ran for student body president really more so because it just seemed impossible. They're like, Jamal, what are you doing? You're not a big personality, and there's no way you can win. And I said that, well, my major was not in math, it's in miracles. And what that did was really set me off on a journey of adventure, because then I realized, and I want to stress to college students today, that take the chance in college. Everybody takes it so serious, but it's okay to mess up, because at college, the stakes are low. So when you're now on TV interviewing, in 10 years when you're on Fox News or CNN, I can say I knew her because she interviewed and got those skills as a freshman, and you were able to hone it when the stakes were low.
After that, you then attended the University of Massachusetts, Amherst, to get your Master's of Education and worked at Texas A&M University and Amherst College. So what were your career aspirations at this point?
So for being president, I wanted to be a college president one day, because my mentor became UF President Bernie Machen, and I just loved how a university works. Yes, it's an education entity, but it's also a business. So seeing that gave me so much intrigue. So I went to work I did a fellowship at Texas A&M, worked at Amherst College, and obviously UMass Amherst. So my master's was in higher ed administration. And for me, it was really wanting to expand my horizons outside the South. Born and raised in the South, had never really ever been to the Northeast. It was a phenomenal experience, because intellectually it pushed me to show that I had what it took to really achieve anywhere I went. When you're in this bubble of your friends and you've done well in college, it's comfortable to go to UF for grad school, law school, PhD. For me, I said, well, I want to challenge my intellect with the kids from Yale, from Harvard, Amherst, Williams. And that made me uncomfortable at first, but it was the best thing that could have happened because I was there by myself, didn't have any friends, didn't know anybody, but really had to grow as an adult. It really proved to myself that I had what it took from the great skills garnered at UF to really do well around the world.
I think it's fascinating, constantly pushing yourself. It's scary. So while in grad school, you also enlisted in the United States Marine Corps. What inspired your service and what do those 5 years mean to you?
My grandfather was in World War II, my dad was in Vietnam, and my brother was in Iraq. And this is the time, early 2000s, everybody was protesting the war in terms of the wars in Iraq, Afghanistan. I did not want to miss my time in history, and I also wanted to serve because of the family legacy. My dad retired from the Army, and for me, I had so many friends who say, well, we support the troops. We are for the troops, but they would never serve. They were like buff in the gym all the time at the Southwest Rec Center. And I'm like, well, you support the troops, and you're healthy, so you should join, right? And it just perplexed me. And I did not want to be that type who say, I wish I would have, I could have. So I just did it. I did it. I told my family after the fact, like, what are you doing? Right now, this is '06. Everybody's mad at Bush and the wars. Everybody's protesting. Again, it came from my desire at UF to really want to expand my horizons, push myself to become better, but also take chances. Yes, it was a chance, but it was a chance of a lifetime. And I'm thankful for my father setting that example, my grandfather, my brother for showing that service is something that's special and that's something that should be respected, but also something that people should want to do and not just talk about it when it's convenient.
You returned to Gainesville eventually in 2011. You then became Special Assistant to the University of Florida President and Assistant Corporate Secretary. Tell us a little bit about what this role entailed. So President Machen at that time was he started in January of '04, and his plan was to stay about 8 years. He stayed longer. So he asked me, Jamal, how about you come to work for me to learn how to be a class president? You'll be my right hand, going to meetings. You'll coordinate all the activities of the Board of Trustees, all the votes, all the process. So that allowed me to show, I really learned the idea of governance, how a school is operated and how it's ran. Having the chance to learn from a person who was president of the University of Utah, provost of the University of Michigan, acting president of the University of Michigan, just a vast array of experiences opened so many doors for me and said, I want to be like that one day. I want to learn how to run a university. And for him, it was more so about really empowering students, whether it's through scholarships, but also you have so many different constituencies, whether it's alumni, whether it's donors, whether it's faculty, whether it's staff, students, the legislature, but having to learn from him directly for 3.5 years was phenomenal. So I left that job when he was about to retire, but that really changed my entire trajectory. So the idea of mentorship is key because somebody can get all the degrees that they want, but having the chance to learn directly in the studio, learn directly from a CEO or president, that is once in a lifetime opportunity that really that allows you to learn from their success and also from their mistakes. After that, in 2014, you enrolled in Indiana University Bloomington Maurer School of Law on a Pat Tillman Scholarship. So what motivated you to pursue a law degree? And tell me a little bit about, your experience working in Israel at this time.
My father was a lawyer. He graduated UF Law back in 1974. Always wanted to go to law school, did not want to practice law. My aunt was a lawyer too. But for me, the academic rigor that I saw that he had, having a JD would open so many doors. Thought about going to the MBA route, but wanted to go the law route because of my father. And for me, it was more so trying to really, that family legacy, but I wanted to also leave Florida for a time because I felt that I was getting too comfortable. I was a student leader here, then came back home. It was great and everything, but I had lived in every part of the US except the Midwest. So for me, it was more so a chance to really leave Florida, get some more expertise, because for me, to be a college president, schools want people who have a vast array of experiences to show that you've worked at different schools, you've been at different schools, your degrees are from different schools. And when I saw backgrounds of college presidents, I realized that, oh, this is very intriguing how UF picks presidents from other places. And a lot of schools do that because you want somebody who has different ideas, a different thought process, and also a vast array of experiences that can make the school better. But it opens so many doors intellectually, so many doors professionally. Being in the Midwest was amazing. There's a term called Midwest modesty. Everybody's very nice out there. And for me, that allowed me to really understand America better, from having now lived in every single region of the country. So I was so intrigued with going to Israel. My first time in Israel was in college, because I joined the Jewish Student Union and I was involved in a group called Gators for Israel. And then I went to Israel during college. So then I went, my second time was spending that whole semester there. Phenomenal. I lived in Tel Aviv, but I could walk to the Israeli Mall. I worked in the area called Ramat Gan. People would ask me, do you speak Hebrew? And I would say, Ani lo medaber ivrit, which means I don't speak Hebrew. And someone would say, oh, I'm from Miami. What's up? And it was just a phenomenal experience because it really showed me an international country that is very passionate about who they are and what they do. But also it gave me a desire to learn about the world. And obviously I had already been to Afghanistan, but walking to work in Israel every day, taking the bus, talking to people, just a chance of a lifetime. But also having that experience really broadened my horizon to one day bring those skills back to my home state of Florida.
So you speak, about different viewpoints, different religions. How do you think that's impacted how you work in all these different kind of careers that you've kind of worked in?
Where I grew up in Orlando, most of my friends my backgrounds went to the same churches. We went to revivals all the time, Bible studies on Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, youth groups, and that was what we did in Orlando. And it was fun, and I enjoyed it because my brother is now a praise and worship leader at a church. I have one brother who's an associate pastor at a church in Kansas. But I realized when I got to college, I said, if all of my friends think like me, have the same background, my perspective, my connection is going to be very, very limited. And not even when it comes to just friends, but also when it comes to business, when it comes to opportunities. So my freshman year, I went to the Hillel and I met a guy named Keith Dvorchik, who is now a mentor of mine. He was the CEO of the Hillel. I was just asking him questions. He was very intrigued. He became a mentor of mine, and that's now 23 years ago. But for me, it was more so making sure that I made friends organically that did not look like me, that did not have my beliefs, that did not think like me. And now that has really opened the door for so many opportunities in my career because I can have a perspective or at least ask or know where to find it when it comes to having a friend who has nothing in common with me aesthetically, but now so much good friends, I know how it is to really tap into someone's intellectual depth or their faith or just to ask questions in a genuine manner to really find the commonalities. And what that did for me at UF was really, it changed my life.
So in 2016, you worked for Indiana Congressman Todd Young. How did that opportunity come about and what impact were you able to make in that office?
In law school, I served on 2 academic journals, but I knew I did not want to practice law because I saw what my dad did and it was great for him, but I enjoyed foreign policy. So Congressman Todd Young had an office in Bloomington, Indiana because he lived there. One day I reached out and just called him. I said, I want to work for you. Great experience because at this time he was running for the United States Senate. But he had been in the Marine Corps, he went to the Naval Academy, he had a master's, went to law school. It was very intriguing, but he had a very humble persona. Having the chance to work for him and see him on a regular really inspired me to show that people can serve in different ways. And being that Bloomington, Indiana was a small town, having the opportunity to walk to his office, to work all day and walk home and obviously and then study kind of expanded my horizon because not everybody's going to be a 4.0. That definitely wasn't me. Not everybody's going to be the perfect student, but for me, my experience intellectually was going to come from outside the classroom, from the academic journals, from being involved in debates and discussions. And that's really how I learned the best. And having the chance to work for a congressman in Indiana at that time, even though Indiana may be a smaller state, it gave me a global experience.
I think it's really fascinating that you called him up and asked him for a job, which is something, especially as a freshman, when you're entering this world of just people want to help. People want to be resources for others. I think it's really interesting to utilize that and see how far it can take you.
I say all somebody can say is no, but you don't want to have a regret. I always have a thing that I do not want to die with regrets. Both of my parents have passed. When I had the chance to spend with them, they just had so much joy that their legacy was passed down to their kids. And I want to be one day like that, to tell my son, I've laid it all on the field, I don't have any regrets, and I wanted to do everything that I did on this earth to make a positive impact.
So in December 2018, Governor-elect Ron DeSantis named you as Florida's Secretary of Commerce and CEO of Enterprise Florida, Inc. What does that role entail, and what were some of your biggest challenges?
At that time, I was at the port. I had just bought a house in 2017. So in Tampa Bay, you have the Hillsborough side, Pinellas side, and St. Pete. Loving it. I have family there. I'm set. I don't want to move, don't want to go anywhere. I am content. A buddy of mine asked me to interview for the governor-elect. And at first I was like, no, I'm good because I just got back to Florida. My father was getting older, wanted to be there. But he said, Jamal, just interview. Just interview, it's okay. Just interview, because I learned to never say no to an interview. Even if you don't want the job, at least have the conversation, because you never know what type of door that can open. So I interviewed and obviously was asked to be the Secretary of Commerce. And that was a role that really allowed me to tap back into my experience in Israel, because 5 months into the role, we did a trade mission to Israel, which was amazing, because I was able to see my friends and say, Boker Tov, Shalom, and saw friends and family there that I've known for years from my time as a freshman, meeting my friends on campus at the Hillel or through JSU or through other organizations. So that role was primarily the economic development arm for the state of Florida, to recruit businesses and also to expand companies from the Northeast, from the Midwest, from the West Coast down to Florida. So when those who are talented, like yourself and other UF Gators, they may want to graduate and leave Florida, but we can say, hey, no, we have these corporations here in Florida, here in Miami, here in Orange County, here in rural Florida, in the Panhandle, that you can stay in Florida to work these jobs rather than going to New York, rather than going to Chicago or LA. Now, granted, I tell people, have the experience, see how it is, but we want you to come back home one day to really bring those skills back to the state of Florida.
So, kind of going off what you were saying, as someone who is now living in North Central Florida for the first time, what have you been able to take away from the communities here?
My father's from a small town called Jasper, Florida, about an hour, 10 minutes north of here, Hamilton County, Florida. I'm born and raised there. So I have a lot of family in Gainesville, because people in Jasper is very small, so they'll either move to Tallahassee, Lake City, or Gainesville, or some in St. Pete. So when I got to Gainesville, I was amazed that I had so much family here that I didn't know about. And being from Orlando was kind of close, so I got to know North Central Florida very well, whether it was Lake City, Micanopy, Hawthorne, Blaine, Alachua is what some of my friends called it. It was just amazing, because when people think Gainesville, they think small city, but Gainesville was really an international city. You see it now with people from around the world, and even my friends here who have now stayed here. So when I came back to work for the school, that allowed me to learn Gainesville in a different way, and saw that there's so many treasures here in North Central Florida.
In 2022, you became president of business solutions at Indelible. Tell us a little bit about, this consulting firm, the services you offered, and your responsibilities there.
The firm was started by two Florida natives who are Florida A&M graduates, Joshua Hay and Michael White. And Joshua was from Jacksonville, Mike was from Sarasota. And I met them just through the process and everything. But I realized I was connected to Mike because, remember, I was saying in high school, all we did was go to church revivals in other cities. So I got to know Mike's church from Sarasota, because we would do youth group stuff down there in Sarasota. So when I got to meet him years later in Tallahassee, I really saw the great work they were doing. They were a smaller company. I had always worked for big names, Tampa Port, the Marine Corps, University of Florida. I wanted something different, but I wanted a different pace, because now being married, having a son, my wife is amazing, who's a teacher, who went to Alcorn State in Mississippi in the band, and then also FAMU grad school. I wanted something different, because so many years I focused on achievement, on being James Bond, traveling the world and doing exciting things. But I realized when my father died in August of 2020, I had all that success, all the great feasts, but nobody to share it with. And that's when I really realized that I had to make a change. Because when my father died, he was in hospice, and I was next to him. And my other siblings live other places. Had he not had kids, he may have been there by himself. And for me, that part of my life, that night, really was the time I said, all this stuff is cool, it's great, serving the military, being around the world, and cool jobs, but not having anybody to share that with, to me, was a problem for me. And I knew it was now on me to have kids and make sure that my father's legacy lives on. So now I can tell my son about my father. I can tell him about how much of a great role model he was, to see him serve in the military as a lawyer and really come from a small town in the backwoods of Florida, but make it and to become one of the first 20 black law school graduates at UF and one of the first 100 black lawyers in Florida, but came from the backwoods of Florida picking tobacco. And to me, that night that he died in August 2020 showed me it was time to make a change.
It's clearly impacted how you choose where you want to work and how you want to have your legacy be. And since 2018, you've been a University of Florida Alumni Association board member. So what kind of impels you to remain connected to this, like your alma mater, and to keep coming back to UF?
My time at UF was life-changing because when I would go home to Orlando, a lot of people were just amazed. I was not the most likely to succeed. I was not the most gregarious. I was pretty almost an introvert. And when I would go home, people were like, oh, you're doing this and that. I don't believe it. Like, how? And for me, it was a way to really push myself to be uncomfortable in a new environment when the stakes were low. Because I used to hate public speaking, but I did it all the time at UF. I said, I gotta get better, I gotta get better, gotta get better. So now imagine if you're 30, you've never gained those skills when you were 19, 20, and you're in a boardroom in a job and people are expecting you to have a certain intellectual repertoire of writing and speaking. But now if you haven't gained those skills when it didn't count, that's gonna affect you professionally. So I was glad I made those mistakes of stumbling in my words, having bad speeches, not knowing how to articulate something at 18, 19 years old in Gainesville, because that prepared me for the Marine Corps. And what being student body president did for me, it gave me confidence to then say, well, if I can become student body president at UF, I can go to Afghanistan, I can be a Marine, I can do all these different things. But that came from that time of pushing myself when it really seemed like all odds were against me. But I'm thankful for people who believed in me, for mentors, professors, students who said, well, hey, maybe we should give them a chance. And I never wanted to disappoint people.
I think it's really interesting, to come from the fact that, I wasn't valedictorian in high school.
I definitely wasn't.
And UF is not just a bunch of 4.0s walking around. And a lot of people have to find their individual path and their individual story. So I think it's really interesting for you to point out that there's not a one-track person that's going to UF and a one-track like way out of, UF once you graduate.
Definitely.
So you're also now on the board of Team Red, White, and Blue and a member of the Florida Council of 100. So tell us a little bit about these organizations and the importance of being involved with organizations like these.
I have a rule in terms of involvement. It has to be something I'm passionate about, because now when you're a father, have a wife, it's different with time. And for me, Team Red, White, and Blue is a veterans organization that really focuses on veterans' physical fitness. And whether it's our teams that work out in California, it's national. So the idea is when somebody gets out of the military, they may not be in the reserves, but they still want that camaraderie from other veterans who can then, they can hike with, work out with, have that camaraderie wherever they live in the country, and really build a friendship and a support group of veterans, whether it's mental health or physical health. And that's what we focus on. The Council 100 is a body of business leaders in Florida who are selected by its membership to really give insight on the business climate in the state. Is some of the top CEOs and leaders from around the state, and that really allows me to keep my hand involved in things with the business climate, government, the economy. So for me, that was important because I wanted to make sure, even though now I was out of government, I was still able to give back, still able to contribute, still able to really have a pulse on what was going on in the state, which helps business at Indelible, whether it's our IT work, our healthcare work, transportation, or even our emergency management services. To me, that is really allows me to stay plugged in.
I think it's really, interesting. You've been involved in all these organizations and projects, in your career. So I think what I'm just trying to lead it up to is, do you have an example of an organization or a project that you're particularly proud of the impact that it's caused?
I would say two.
Two? Okay.
So for the UF students who are going to hear this, the number one thing that I did in undergrad was preview staff. Preview staff opened so many doors for me because I made friends a whole summer. I got to know all the incoming freshmen, and that allowed my network to grow, but also friendships made through that. One of my best friends I met through preview staff. He was my preview student. He's now an anchorman in Columbia, South Carolina, but he started right here in this studio doing interviews. And now that he's on TV, I said, wow, I met him because I was a preview staffer. And that really made a huge difference. Number two, I would say the Boys and Girls Club of America. I'm on the board for the Central Florida Boys and Girls Club of America. And I was a club kid. I went to the Boys and Girls Club in Pine Hills of Orlando. And that really allowed me to have and experience from friends and peers from all around the city, but also to really be empowered in the summertime. Because when you're a kid and you're at home yourself by the summertime, bad stuff can happen. But when you are in an environment that's controlled, that's positive, that's with other youth, that really opened doors for me. So when I turned 40 years old, I had my 40th birthday party at the Boys and Girls Club as a fundraiser to raise money for the Boys and Girls Clubs, because I was a product of that, and I wanted to make sure that I was able to give back.
I think, you clearly stand as an example of the importance of community, of asking, why not, and of just constantly raising the bar. So do you have any advice for, a student like me just starting out my collegiate career and professional journey?
One word of advice, when I had a class at UF called Modern Jewish Thought. And the reason why I say this, because as someone who was raised Christian, my brothers are Christian ministry, I wanted to learn other faiths. And in that class, Modern Jewish Thought, in the Talmud, we were taught in the class, it was a scripture said, "Who is a wise man? He who learneth from all men." So the idea was you become more wise as you learn from more people. You're not gonna know everything. Everybody has a different perspective, different background, different ideology. They grew up differently. So when you learn from everybody, that can make you wiser. I really want to encourage the idea of really just asking the question of somebody who is different, somebody who came from a different background. And that can really open doors for you that could even change your life to now be a national media figure like you will one day. And I think that network, that friendship, those experiences allow you to see somebody else's path that can really empower you.
Well, thank you very much for your insight, Jamal. I think me personally, I've learned a lot just about constantly being curious. As a freshman, it can be scary to go out there and just get your feet wet and just not, be afraid to fail. I think you've really shown, especially at the college level, it's okay to fail and to really start harnessing those skills. So I really appreciate that. And thank you to our viewers for joining us. Until next time, good night.
Go Gators.
Go Gators.